All right, that was a song by Corduroy, Brown to My Younger Self is what it was called. And we'll also be featuring a song at our outro, another Appalachian band named Weary Space Wanderer, and their song will be After the Rain. They are listed in the show notes. Check them out. We will be having new artists on intros and outros every single week until we run out of music from Appalachian artists, which hopefully is never. So, all right. John, I got to open the show today. Look, this is let's not ignore the elephant in the room, so to speak. This is the day that Hillbilly Elegy, the movie, comes out on Netflix. If you're listening to it on the day that's published, and we're not going to be talking about it much. We are going to be listing all of our shows that we did that talk about Hillbilly Elegy. We're going to have the guide to all the alternative things to read or watch or listen to. That's out on our social medias. Check that out. But today we've got some counter programming, and I want to start this counter programming out with a great intro. John, we got to talk about what is taking the internet by storm right now. And no, I'm not talking about Rudy Giuliani's hair coloring dripping down his face. I'm not talking about the Trump lawsuits. What I'm talking about is the Florida man. Now, Florida man is this term used to kind of denigrate Florida in a way, actually. Like, there's always these stories about dumb guys in Florida, rather, doing stupid stuff. And the headline's always, Florida man eats fire, throws up on baby, that type of thing. Well, this is a compelling story, John. Florida retiree wrestles puppy from the jaws of an alligator. It does not get better than that. And this is real. There was a video of it.
I couldn't finish the video. The video is so obviously real that I was like, I'm looking at my two dogs thinking like, well, and having a panic attack. So I didn't finish it. Well, I know what video you're talking about, though.
Well, let me walk you through it, and I'll walk our listeners through it. All right. So, and if you're too triggered like John, you don't have to watch. This is a guy, his name is Richard Wilbanks, 74 years old, from Estero, Florida. He's got this backyard pond, and his dog, I hear your dog in the background, by the way.
They're killing me.
Are you recording on Audacity?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's fine. Just send me the audio file. Anyway, so Richard Wilbanks, a 74-year-old guy in Florida, he's got a pond in his backyard, and he's got a dog. It is a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. I have no idea what that is, but it's like basically a mini Cocker Spaniel, small dog, not a big thing. He's out there and he sees his dog get taken into his pond by a little alligator. And so he said, and I quote, "The alligator came out of the water like a missile. I never thought an alligator could be that fast." So this is a guy, all right, and I'm going to describe what the video does. He jumps in the pond. He's got a white t-shirt on, a white hat, pair of jeans. Most important detail, a lit cigar. Jumps into the pond with the cigar, pulls the gator with the dog out, and he is submerged, by the way, from what I can tell. Pulls it out, pries the jaws of the alligator off this poor dog. And by the way, for everybody listening, the dog was fine. They took it to the vet. They got everything taken care of. Gunner, the dog's name Gunner, is fine now. Just make sure we're clear on that. But John, the best part, Richard came out of that water with that cigar still in his mouth. What an OG legend right there. I can't hear you. You're muted.
I had to be because my dogs are terrible. He understands his priorities. First is obviously saving the dogs, and second is that cigar. I can respect that.
I can't argue with that as a priority. And I would just I think that this is the guy that's going to save us from 2020. It's not like some superhero in a cape. It's not some well-dressed person with a suit and tie or a fancy ball gown coming to sweep us off our feet. It is Richard Wilbanks, cigar in mouth, jumping into this muddy pond of a year and wrestling the jaws of 2020 off of our vulnerable bodies. That is exactly what it is.
An incredible feat. Not the hero we deserve, but the hero we need.
I would argue it's probably the hero we deserve.
Also, he's probably going to get canceled in like 2 weeks for doing something. So
yeah, no, he probably will. That's fine. No, Richard's always welcome on this show. But
well, it depends on what he gets canceled.
That's true. That's true. No, he's not. That's right. That's right. It's true. If he gets canceled for wrestling alligators, then
he's welcome.
That's ridiculous.
Right.
Anyway, had to share that story. Very inspiring, and I think kind of a story for our time. But announcements, John. Again, want to give our Patreon people a shout out. The new ones. You want to go through the list?
I don't have the list. I thought you had it.
Okay, I do, but I didn't. I put in the Steve Hofstetter.
I can do it. Hold on 1 second. I have the Patreon app.
God damn it! Gotta fucking edit all this shit out.
Sorry, I'm trying. All right, so
John,
we have 5 new members for our Patreon.
Damn.
You're gonna have to help me here. How do you say Bolliards first? Adley. Okay, we have 5 new patrons. Pretty awesome stuff. We have Adley, which if I'm butchering your name, I'm really sorry. Chad, Elizabeth, Michael, and April. We thank you so much for joining the Patreon. It means the world to us. If you haven't joined, make sure that you do. Patreon.com/@podlachia. It's definitely worthwhile. We're doing a giveaway, Chuck. Don't forget about that. Giveaway on Instagram, which means you have like a 1 in 5,000 chance, or you can join our Patreon and have an exclusive giveaway, which is like 1 in 50. It's pretty good odds.
I mean, it's better than 1 in 5,000. I'm no mathematician, but
nope. I don't math very well, but I do know that.
That is fair. That is fair. I had to look up something. Okay. Yeah, no. Very exciting stuff. I'm excited to get those tumblers, get them ordered, get them out. So very cool. And
I guess
again,
we should say what we're giving away because people may not have seen the post.
Oh, I thought you mentioned it. Sorry, I was trying to look up a note. Well, okay, so and for this giveaway, so this is what we're actually giving away. We are getting them made. They're actually in the process now. I just need to push order. Exclusive Podlachia tumblers. Those are like your drink containers, stainless steels, got our logo on it. You can see a picture of the mock-up on our social media. We'll also post pictures when they're actually delivered before we send them out, but they're really cool. I'm really excited about it, high quality stuff, and wanted to do something a little bit special for reaching the 5,000 follower mark on Instagram, and also something special for all of our Patreon patrons because, man, I still am blown away by how many we've got and how many we continue to get. And so it's just exciting to see. And I think it'll be cool.
These tumblers are so exclusive, Chuck. You and I do not have one.
No, that's how exclusive they are.
That's how exclusive. Like Big John cannot get his hands on one of these tumblers. So
it's true.
If you win this, you're probably better than me. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I like how you put the caveat in there. Probably, cover your ass. That's smart.
Just in case they get canceled before this episode airs.
And if you heard that on the audio, that was John cracking open a hard cider.
Look, this is on point. This is on brand. I guess I should say. I'm drinking, for all of you always wondering, Blake's hard cider. And if you don't know,
who the fuck is Blake?
I have no idea. But they give money to our four-legged friends and our veterans. Pretty cool stuff. So good company to support. But anyway, back to the show.
That is true. Yeah. Well, anyway, before we move into the content of our show, the main squeeze, we got to do the segment that I always do, which is not Beef with Big John. In fact, it is Data-lachia, where I pick a number relevant to Appalachia. John tries to guess what it is. Then he's usually wrong, so we tell him what it is, and then we talk about it.
I like you say, usually I have not been fucking close.
Well, you might actually get the one today. So
all right, I'm going to know this one. Here we go.
That's why I put that in there. The number is $1 million. $1 million with an M dollars. Dinero.
How the
cheddar.
$1 million. I remember. Look, I remember my first million, and it's definitely the first. It was the hardest to get. So I'm trying to think of.
Well, for a spoiler, it is not a reference to your first $1 million that you made.
Good, because it hasn't happened yet.
Just blew the credibility of this entire show.
Yeah, well, if they thought I was a millionaire, they probably weren't listening.
Yeah, if we're at episode like 52 and we're worrying about blowing our credibility, I think it's a little too late.
I've blown that shit out of the water a long time ago. Anyway, I'm going to say 1 million people have left Appalachia.
That is not dollars.
Oh, you're talking about dollars?
I said $1 million several times, and then you started talking about your first $1 million.
I don't believe it. But anyway. All right, $1 million is
It's kind of funny because you gave me shit last week for not indicating that I was referring to money.
And I'm pretty pissed this week that you decided to indicate money because I wasn't expecting it, to be honest with you. Anyway, $1 million is what Kid Rock has given to Donald Trump for his legal counsel fees.
That's a good guess. That's a great guess.
Thank you.
It's not the million that I was referring to. Okay. However, I am not necessarily disputing that because I believe that could be true.
It definitely could be.
We don't fact check in real time on this episode.
Or ever.
Speak for yourself. I fact check myself, but then for you, I just don't worry about it.
Sure.
But no, it was actually $1 million refers to the $1 million that came from the Queen of Appalachia herself, Dolly Parton, funding vaccine research efforts for COVID-19. She's done it again. John coming in the clutch, tossing her hat in the ring to help humanity. Dolly Parton, man. What's there to say about Dolly? This was not a traditional Data-lachia because there's not like much to discuss here, but other than like Dolly, she's great. We're big Dolly fans on this show, and had to just throw that in there because we couldn't not mention that on this show.
I'm so mad.
What are you mad about?
That I didn't get that. I should have known that, Chuck. That's on me. Well, if this desk was not so heavy, I would flip it. That's how angry I am. It's one of those things that I should have got. Okay, I understand that. I'm gonna learn from this mistake.
Always learning, lifelong learner. This guy.
That's all I've ever done my entire life is continue to learn. So I'm going to do it for Data-lachia, and I'm going to do it for our audience. But here's the thing, Chuck. There is something to discuss here. Dolly Parton gave $1 million, right, to help this vaccine, and we know, you and I, although we're Dolly Parton fans, no person is perfect, right? You're not perfect. I'm not. Well, I'm close, but I'm not perfect. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Dolly Parton has, although she was praised on social media and things like that, she also took a lot of shit for this, which I didn't understand. I know that people are trying to like pull things into context, like how much money she pays people versus, the money that she spent. To me, these are mutually exclusive things that we should at least praise her for this and maybe talk about the other stuff at another time. Like that really bugged me on this.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with you. And you're right. We do have something to talk about with this. I'm with you because here's the thing is any person on this earth, you can find flaws in. Again, I know it's hard to believe with us, but
right.
But yeah, any person that walks this earth, you can find plenty of flaws in. Look, like Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, two of like the greatest human beings to exist in the world, objectively with some of the stuff that they've done, they still, fucked up sometimes in their lives or did stuff that was, other people might view negatively. I'm not going to go into big history lessons, but just to say like, and that's, there's a whole conversation we had about like hero worship and all this stuff. And should we be making statues of people? La-di-da-di-da. We can have that discussion later. But I think what's important is that we praise the efforts now, and the fact that like Dolly Parton, she could have just sat on her stacks of cash and not done anything, because she could literally pay for a bubble to walk around the world in to not worry about COVID-19. But she shelled out $1 million, which is nothing to sneeze at, and which is what a lot of rich ass people throw to politicians who don't do shit, and gave it towards efforts of trying to make this pandemic manageable and go away, or at least like make people's lives better with this new reality that we live in. And for that, like, fuck all the other stuff. That's important, and it deserves to be pointed out. I mean, come on, like, we can't just be these pious people that sit atop of a pedestal. Because, you know, I don't know. I think I'm getting off track here. I'm not saying that Dolly Parton is perfect, but I am saying that this was a great fucking thing to do, and that merits being pointed out. And that's what matters. That's what matters.
We're currently in a society now that can, this has been said a million times, but that can sit behind a keyboard and pretend that we don't have flaws while other people do. And that has been a major issue, especially on Twitter and every other kind of social media platform. But here's the thing. Just because you praise somebody for one thing does not mean that you accept them for everything that they've ever been. That's not how life works. Life is a very interesting thing, but it's kind of like winning a spelling bee, Chuck. This is what I compare it to.
Okay.
Did you ever win a spelling bee when you were a kid?
I absolutely did. I won the 6th grade spelling bee. I think on the word Pueblo, but I'd have to double check.
Great.
I still have that fucking trophy too. That is something I'm very proud of.
Let me get to my fucking point.
I need to make my accomplishment clear. All right, that's all.
Listen here, Pueblo. Anyway,
that's racist.
I don't know what that word even means.
It's a mid-sized city in Colorado.
How is that racist then?
Pueblo is also a word that's like from the Spanish language for something. I don't remember.
Anyway, so you can't even define the word that you've spelled right.
Actually, I can. It's a North American Indian settlement of the southwestern U.S., especially one
You're
consisting of multi-storied houses built by the Pueblo people.
Okay, anyway.
Jeez.
Listen here, Chuck. Would you consider yourself to be the greatest speller now?
I mean, are we talking now or back then?
I said now.
No.
Right, and I don't hold that against you. I look at your accolades and I say, wow, he won by winning. He won.
the Blennerhassett Elementary School.
Right.
6th grade, year 2002.
Okay.
Spelling bee.
Right. And I look at you and I say, my God, my
standing on the shoulders of giants here.
my friend is a champion, right? And I accept you as a champion back then. I no longer look at you as a champion.
Wait a second. Okay. So that logic would suggest that Tom Brady is not a Super Bowl champion anymore.
Right. He's a 6-time former Super Bowl champion.
Okay. All right.
You are a 1-time former spelling bee champion. And I accept. Look,
confusing, but okay. I get where you're going.
I accept you as that. Okay.
Wow. Thanks.
But I don't
because I've been rejected as that my whole life. People just reject me for my accolades as a former speller.
I know. I've read your fucking Tumblr. I know. Anyway. That's all Chuck posts.
Fuck you. I post on Medium, bitch.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, to get to the point, Dolly Parton is not a perfect person. You are not a perfect person. I am not a perfect person. The person listening to this is not a perfect person. But here's the thing. We can still have accolades and we could still be praised for certain things. That doesn't mean that we're accepting everything that is about that person. And I think that is the weird misconception that's happening all over is we've now become an all or nothing society. It needs to stop. Dolly Parton did a good thing. That's undisputable. She may have other things that you question, but that is mutually exclusive to this.
And maybe she doesn't. Who knows? But
I don't know.
And that's I'm just saying, like, I think that this is, I mean, we could talk for hours on just like internet culture and how horrible things have become from a toxicity standpoint. But you know what? We're just gonna say this, Dolly Parton, keep doing what you're doing with that. That was a good deed.
And I've always wanted to do this. I can wrap this up.
Jesus Christ, here we go.
Are you ready? Are you ready? I need confirmation.
Sure.
Okay. I've always wanted to start a slow clap.
Doesn't work if you're the only one clapping, though.
I started it.
Well, all right, fair enough. You started it. You started something.
What's our show about?
and I accept you for that. But that's a good question, John. Speaking of slow claps, our show today.
I don't think that's true.
That doesn't matter if it's true. It's our show.
Oh yeah,
we can make it true. We
just
make our own.
From now on, you should just say transition.
Transition, smooth transition. All right, John. Speaking of smooth transitions, today.
Oh shit.
Speaking of things that are wholly irrelevant to the topic at hand today, John, we've got a good palate cleanser here. You know, we're done with Hillbilly Elegy. We're putting it in the past. You want to find our stuff on it, you can. We are
until we get to my beef.
Until we get to. Sans beef.
It's literally in the future.
Well, then people will think it's funny. There you go. We are
okay.
aside from John's I can't.
Oh shit. Okay, go ahead.
At least mute yourself so I don't have to cut the track. Jesus. Aside from John's beef today, we're moving on from Hillbilly Elegy. We're done. It's over. Aside from the beef, John's got a little beef, a little tender beef there. We're going to get into it there. But we got a palate cleanser today, some counter programming. John, we got a pretty big guest today. He is extremely well known, a well known comedian. John, do you want to talk about our guest?
Yeah, shout out to our listener Nikki, because without Nikki, we wouldn't have got this. It's one of those things that. Why are you raising your hand?
I want to see what it would do.
Okay. All right.
It's kind of funny.
Okay. Shout out to our listener, Nikki. She tagged us in a tweet with Steve. That is how essentially we got started. Anyway, our guest is Steve Hofstetter, which if you don't recognize the name, you've probably seen his videos. He is the comedian that is, I would say, most likely that you've seen owning hecklers. So he's very well known now. His Twitter game has kind of been fire recently, where he just kind of goes after Donald Trump a lot, Rudy Giuliani a lot. He's very left comedian, I guess I would say, but he's also an observationalist. He calls it as he sees it. He's one of those guys who, he's not from Appalachia. Let's just state that right off the front, right?
And that's okay.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, in this interview, we really don't talk about Appalachia. And the reason
we do a little bit though.
But we really, right, but it's really based off Steve, right? And I urge you to listen till the very end of that interview, because I promise you that the story that it ends on is awesome. It really does wrap into Appalachia, and it's something that Steve told us, which I don't know if many people know. If you're a big Steve fan. Anyway, Steve Hofstetter from Queens, New York, now living in California, was nice enough to join us for this interview.
Very exciting stuff. Yeah, that Easter egg at the end, worth sticking around for. It's a cool little nugget about West Virginia. I'll just tease it out a little bit there. But anyway, yeah, we hope you all really enjoy our interview with Steve. I know that we did, and so be kind of a good break from all the crazy madness out there. So without further ado, our interview with Steve Hofstetter.
Thanks for giving us the time. We really appreciate it. This was I'm really excited to do this interview, but I'm nowhere near as excited as my wife. She was. I told her that we had booked this interview, and she called me a liar. So at least at least I could finally prove to her I wasn't lying, because you are by far her favorite comedian. So just a quick shout out to my wife on that one.
Well, tell her that she's excellent taste.
Yeah, she is. She made sure that we would buy tickets to your show in Columbus. So we'll see you in 2021.
Much appreciated.
So I just want to kind of jump into your background real quick. I know that you're from Queens, right?
Correct.
Okay. Interesting thing that I didn't know about until recently was that you went to high school with Lin-Manuel Miranda.
I did. In fact, there was actually a play that we did where I have this playbill still from high school where it was myself, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Chris Hayes from MSNBC all in the same play.
What a small world.
Yeah, Lin was 15, Chris and I were 16.
That's incredible. And now look at all three of you. Well, I should have gone to that high school. I could have done something. I could have done something.
Yeah, I look at that, and I'm like, how many Tony Awards between us? They're all Lin, but still, how many between us?
Yeah, I mean, between the three of you, you've got a shit ton. So that's great.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I think this was interesting to me is that, and you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but the whole bullying thing when you were in high school, you guys were bullied by the same person who ended up becoming a rapper.
Yes. And the stories I tell in my book, they could be about anybody. Who knows who they're about because of legal reasons. But basically, look, everybody knew Felipe as a bully in high school. He was a terror. And we get it. People can grow up and they can change. He apologized to Lin once Lin called him out for it.
Mm-hmm.
And he also gave some sort of like, oh, I apologize to everybody I hurt then. And I see that and I'm like, you can reach out to the rest of us.
Yeah.
You know who we are. You could just make a post in the alumni Facebook group. Just make a post. Be like, hey guys, real sorry. I was a terror when I was in high school and I physically hurt a lot of you and emotionally hurt others. And now that I've grown up, I'd like to atone for it. But instead, he's just like, yeah, it was a long time ago. Like, yeah, thanks, Felipe.
Well, the reason I brought that up is when I grew up, I was always bullied, especially for being a bigger guy. But I found that if I could make people laugh, they'd stop. Did bullying ever influence your career choice, or did it ever help you want to become a comedian or anything like that?
It didn't help me want to become a comedian because I didn't connect the two. It did help me want to be funny, though.
Okay.
And, part of what I talk about in Ginger Kid is that when I kind of stumbled into comedy when I was 13, it was the first time I was getting positive attention for something. And, I didn't know enough then that like, oh, this is a disarming quality. This is something that can help me out of bad situations. All I knew at the time was just like, oh, there are no bullies in here.
Mm-hmm.
And the attention seems to be positive. So I went with it.
That's awesome. I know that. So you get out of high school. Did you go to college? I didn't look that up. Where'd you go to college?
Yeah. That's okay. I went to Columbia.
Oh, okay. All right. So you graduate from college, and I noticed you kind of take a pit stop. You don't go go straight into full-time comedy. You start writing for Sports Illustrated. Is that right?
Well, kind of. So I started out as I was supposed to be a sports journalist. That was my goal. And, I had my junior year of college, I actually took off a year because I had an opportunity to be a beat writer with the Yankees, which was just such a crazy opportunity. Yeah. In a year that they went to the World Series against my Mets of all things. But and then graduating, I was expecting to do that. And I had an internship for Sports Illustrated for Kids coming out of college. And I also, started doing freelance stuff for ESPN and wherever I could get a gig here and there. But it was when the .com bubble burst. So all these mid-level guys were coming back to entry-level print jobs. And it was really hard to find work. And I started doing comedy kind of to pass the time. And the weird thing was that even though my goal was to write for SI, I didn't actually get a column for SI until after I started comedy. Because when I started getting attention for my stand-up is when SI was like, okay, let's take a look. Because I was different. And so, I think that happened because the New York Times sports section did a story about me as a sports writer who occasionally referenced sports in my stand-up. And then, that caught some people's eye. And so I was able to become a sports writer because I couldn't become a sports writer and became a comic.
Well, all right. That is something obviously I did not know. So now we're at least, I understand your background a lot more now. Now we've kind of gone into the comedy realm of your career. The big question that I had, George Carlin is one of my favorite comedians of all time. Would you consider yourself a Carlin guy, like an observationalist type comedian?
Oh, I am a direct descendant of that school. Like
awesome.
He was one of the guys that my father used to play for me when I was a kid. And, the way I view it is basically the lineage is Lenny Bruce, George Carlin, Bill Hicks, and then the rest of us. There's no clear disciple of Hicks. But, the rest of us who are in that school now came from that lineage.
It's kind of like a coaching tree, like a Bill Belichick coaching tree almost. It's everybody branches out and no one can beat Belichick, just like no one could probably beat Carlin, but at least we can at least see the branches come down, which is pretty cool. It's more recently, I guess, your Twitter game has been kind of fire. That's the easiest way I can put it, but it's because you've now started to combine politics with still being funny. Was combining politics and comedy always part of the plan, or did your set kind of evolve to that?
Well, it was always part of what I did. I've been a political comedian for 18 years. Lately there's just been a lot more to talk about. And so when there's this much material, it's, it gets a little easier. But also I just think it's become more important. Even when, I grew up as a comic when Bush was president. And I did a lot of stuff about it. And, I talked about voting and I talked about elections. And starting in 2004, I've always toured in swing states around election time. Like that's been my way of canvassing. But back then, no matter how upset we were, no matter how scared we were, we always had faith in the institution itself. And what's scary right now is that the institutions are what's crumbling, and that's what we need to prevent from happening. And so I've become louder and louder in that arena because of that.
Hey, Steve, this is Chuck. I'm really curious because I hear from a lot of other comedians during like these sort of Trump era that it's almost overripe for parody. Do you ever find yourself realizing that reality is almost too absurd to even make jokes about, because I mean, you have things like the Four Seasons total landscaping and Rudy Giuliani's hair dye literally dripping down his face. So like, how do you approach that? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts.
If this were a script, it would have been rejected for absurdity.
100%.
The stuff that's happening right now, you couldn't write. I mean, the amount of even release the Kraken. The Kraken died, you idiot. Like there's every one of these things is a horrible misstep, a terrible gaffe. Just today it came out that the thing that Trump and Tucker Carlson kept saying about, oh, these 3 dead voters in Georgia had their votes cast. It came out that no, those are just 3 people with the same names as dead people. They're common names, and Georgia has 10 million residents, you idiot. Like, there are so many of these things that are so easily explainable, or on the other end, completely hard to believe. And you can make a successful career just reading his tweets and just making disappointed faces. But because of that, it forces us to be more original, try to write our own takes, try to say something that hasn't been said. And the stuff of mine that's been going viral on Twitter lately, and it's really been interesting. It's been, the past 3 weeks, I've gone from 95,000 followers to 115,000 followers. And it's, because I keep having things that pop, and those things that are popping are original takes on the stuff we're all saying. And that's why it works.
I think that's a pretty good breakdown. I know that at the top we didn't tell you much about the podcast. This podcast is as you can tell by the name Appalachia, it's based and centered around Appalachia. I noticed that, and one thing that kind of relates is when you think about Appalachia, a lot of people think about guns and et cetera. You talk about gun control. You have a bit that's a pretty good gun control bit, but in your special Secret Optimist, which was filmed in Indiana, and you make sure to mention that when you open, have you ever had to put a joke on a back burner based on where you are, or do you just always let it go?
This was something that I kind of thought through earlier on in my career. And I realized that people don't come to see the West Virginia version of your set.
Mm-hmm.
They come to see your set. And if every comic performed, I had this realization. I did a show at University of Dallas, and it's a religious school. I forget what sect, but it's a religious school, and I performed there. And it's a religious school in the way that most religious schools are, in that it's loosely affiliated, and the 19-year-olds don't care. And by the way, this is the only show I've ever performed on where someone flashed me. Like, this was not a bunch of conservative students. This was like we had thrown someone out for being drunk and disruptive, and they came around like there was a big picture window behind the crowd, and they flashed. So this is the crowd I'm dealing with. And after the show, I get this, what would have been, if I had printed it out, it would have been like 3 pages, single space email from this student who was like horrified by my content. Don't I know it's a religious school and blah, blah, blah. And I just wrote back to him and I said, hey man, if every one of us did the University of Dallas version of our set every time we perform there, you'd watch the same set every show. We're all independent and different comics, and if you don't want to come and see somebody, don't come and see them. But don't tell them how to be more like what you want. It is up to you to decide what to watch, and you could have walked out at any time, and you could have never come, and that's on you. And I think that to decide what material not to do based on where you are is prejudice, and that's not something I ever want to be.
It's interesting that you say that too, because Chuck and I, we're about, this podcast is about to turn a year old. And when we first started, we struggled with that on, can we talk about certain things if it's, either not Appalachian enough or perceived Appalachian enough versus can we just talk? And we kind of came to the same agreement as you, and that was essentially, it's our show. Why would people come and listen if, for any other reason? So it's cool to hear. It's cool to hear you say that based off your set. I know that. Did you say that you struggled early on with that, or was that just a quick transition?
Well, it was a question that I asked myself early on, and I do sometimes what I call a punishment set, which is basically, if there's a crowd, thankfully I'm at the point in my career now where people come to see me pretty much know what they're getting.
Yeah.
But, earlier on, if a crowd seems to be offended by the easy stuff, I push harder. And, because I realize that, like, no one who's offended by that stuff will ever like me. So I may as well crush with the few people in the room who are enjoying themselves. And if I can make 10 fans for life, that's a net positive. So if people get offended by the simple stuff, I'll just push harder.
I love that mentality. That's fantastic. I want to switch gears a little bit because as comedy is now changing, right? It's at the point where we have COVID, which now people are having to adapt to. A lot of sectors have been hurt, but one that a lot of people don't talk about is comedians and how they've been negatively affected by this. I heard recently that you founded the Nowhere Comedy Club. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I think it was the first 2 months maybe of COVID. There was literally nowhere in the world that a comedian could perform. That's crazy. And I had always said that my job was recession-proof. Because even in the deepest depression, even if we had another Great Depression, I could stand in a park and talk and put a hat down and probably make the same amount I would make at a club that pays me poorly, just by people throwing in a buck. And so I never imagined that there would be a scenario where it would be illegal for people to gather. What we did, pretty quickly, Ben Glebe and I realized that, we have to do something. We have to replace the ability to tour. And so we created the Nowhere Comedy Club, which is a full-time digital comedy club, and now comedy venue because we're doing bigger shows than just club shows. We did a monster show for the Wisconsin Democratic Party that raised $540,000. It had some of the biggest stand-ups in the world on it. And we wouldn't have been able to do that at a theater, because there were, 15,000 tickets sold.
Wow. That's incredible. So I guess the big thing here is, how do you get people on board with something like that? What was your process of getting other comedians to come on board? I looked at the schedule and I noticed that there are other comedians, and I think it even has, you can correct me if I'm wrong, a book a comedian feature. Is that right?
Yeah, because we can book comedians for private parties, for corporate shows. We're actually getting a ton of those requests now because all the companies that usually do holiday parties need to do something. But yeah, we had, the way, like, okay, Mike Birbiglia has now done, I think, 7 shows with us, and he's got another 3 coming up. The way we got Mike Birbiglia was because his agent represents Sam Morril. Sam Morril did it. The reason that Sam Morril did it was because Todd Barry did it. The reason that Todd Barry did it was because Christian Finnegan did it. And the reason Christian Finnegan did it is because he's my friend and he trusts me. And I said, hey, this is a good thing. And that's how it works. We had a couple of early adopters. Christian Finnegan was real early on, Josh Wolf, Ida Rodriguez. And these are just people who we work with enough and we know enough, and they go, all right, Steve, all right, Ben, we believe in you, and let's roll the dice. And then once they have a good experience, it's pretty easy for them to tell somebody else.
This is a question I didn't plan to ask, but now I'm curious. I've always heard that comedians tend to be this close-knit group because you all travel kind of the same circuits and get to know each other here and there. Is that a true type of premise, or is it totally off base?
Yes and no. It's a small world.
Mhm.
You know, you're in it long enough, and pretty much everybody has met each other at some point. But, you know, it just depends on who your circle is. Give you an example. I hosted the first show that Birbiglia did, and I hadn't spoken to him in 10 years. He had done my radio show when I was at Sirius. Actually, it might have been more than 10 years. But, you know, I was hosting the show, and immediately I go into sound check, and he's like, "Oh, hey, Steve, how are you? How you been, man?" And we started talking about when we used to do colleges, because that's part of, you know, where we were in our careers. And
Wow.
so he's not a close friend. I couldn't just call him up, you know, like I could with Josh or Christian or someone I know better. But, you know, it's a small enough world that it's, "Oh, hey, I haven't seen you since this, and how are you?" kind of thing. And you don't get along with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are some people who, if I was on a show with them, I would politely say hello and keep walking. But, you know, there's, I think that's true with any industry.
Yeah, definitely.
But I will say this about it being close-knit. You mess with one of us, you've messed with all of us. There is a very protective aspect of it. And, you know, the best example I could give of that was during the Aurora shooting. One of the people who was shot and who was in a coma was an open mic comic from Denver. Most of us had never met him, never heard his name. A couple of Denver comics were like, "Oh yeah, I think I know that guy." But we all did fundraisers for him and his family.
Wow.
Because you mess with one of us, you've messed with all of us. And to us, that was a very like, could have been me, let's help him out. And we did.
That's incredible. I always say that, you know, comedians are some of the best people in the world because obviously they can stand up, they can make you laugh, they can make you feel good. But if you piss them off, there's a reason why they're the ones that host like roasts and stuff like that. Like they can go either way, make you feel good or make you feel bad. Like comedians have that range. And it's one of those things that I've always kind of really enjoyed seeing the difference of. Obviously I would like the feel good moments more, but you know, everybody likes a good roast here and there.
Yeah, it's there was a concept I used to have with a buddy of mine in college where you know, I referred to myself as her asshole guy friend. And the idea was that, like, you know, we were platonic friends, and if there was a guy who she was thinking of dating, he kind of had to get by me. You know, like the idea was that everybody should have an asshole guy friend, a guy who can be an asshole when you need him. And, you know, obviously, you know, it doesn't matter if I was a dude or not, but the idea of someone who could use their powers for good or evil is, I think, you know, we all need that in our life.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of good and evil, you've now amassed 641,000 subscribers on YouTube. Mostly, I'm assuming, you know, the whole hinting at good and evil, I'm assuming that comes a lot from the heckling videos. Is that a good guess?
Yes. Yeah, the Secret Optimist was a very successful comedy special, and some of the clips from it, you know, the clip about the clip with the dog story in Japan, you know, that bumped me up probably about 50,000. But a lot of the, you know, almost all of my most popular clips are heckler clips.
Yeah, that dog story is hilarious, by the way. Is heckling that common, or do you think people are now kind of targeting you because of these videos? Because it's, you know, you hear comedians talk about heckling, but you don't hear it as much as maybe you talk about it.
I actually don't think that's an either or.
Okay.
I do know that I'm not being targeted. Only one person has come to a show trying to get on my YouTube, and we kicked him out and deleted the footage because I'm never going to let anybody try to ruin someone else's good time to get infamy. Like, that's not how
awesome.
it works.
Good.
But also, I don't get heckled a lot. I get heckled more than the average comic because I'm doing political material, not always in places where they're cool with it. I do 300 shows a year, an hour at a time. I film everything. And also, I don't let it go. Like, a couple of my clips start with me saying, "What'd you just say?" Because, you know, I don't let people get away with it. You know, I think that problems don't solve themselves. But I have done, you know, and all the time I get people say, I shouldn't use the word all, especially with what I'm about to say. Often I get people saying, "You only do heckler clips." And I'm like, okay, I have 200 heckler clips. That seems like a lot until you realize that I have over 1,500 clips.
Right.
Not only that, but I've done over 4,000 shows. Is 1 out of every 20 shows a lot? Because to me, no, that's not a lot.
When you put it like that, it's not.
Yeah, and you just have to do the math of it, and I mean, you have to know the whole equation to be able to do the math. But you know, I've seen comedians. I've seen aspiring open mic comics say something to the effect of like, "Oh, you know, no comic gets heckled this much. You know, it must be fake." And I'm like, okay, I do 300 hours of live stand-up a year. You do 5 minutes 10 times a year in the middle of a show with not much audience. You just have to add up the numbers. You go, the more people who attend a show, the longer you're on stage, the later you are in the show, the more times you go up, and it equals that sometimes someone's going to be drunk.
Yeah, some people take that, the drink minimum a little too far, and then they want to be part of the show.
Yeah.
So I understand. And that's interesting to hear too, because I think, like I said, a lot of people, like, obviously, you're massive on like Facebook videos. That's where I see a ton of your stuff. And I think that's where people might get that perception of you post a lot of heckler videos. But now when you talk about the breakdown of how many shows you do versus how many hours are put into this, it then makes sense, especially with the controversial topics that you tend to cover. So, that does make more sense.
It's also the algorithm. You know, if you watch 2 or 3 heckler videos, the only thing you're going to be recommended for me after that is heckler videos.
True.
That's how the algorithm works. And so, you know, like, if I ever see a comment of, "Oh, you don't have any stand-up online," I laugh about it because I'm like, I have one of the most successful specials on YouTube with over 1 million views, and clips from it have over 50 million views. They just never bothered to look. They just relied on a robot to tell them what they like, and that's why that's all they see.
You currently have 7 specials, is that right? Or at least seven CDs? I don't know how you would say it.
7 albums.
7 albums. Okay.
I don't think all of them are special.
Okay. All right. I didn't know how
7 albums.
Okay. 7 albums. All right. So obviously it based off just having 7 albums, that should show people how much comedy you actually do on stage and how successful you've now become. So, I mean, for them to say that's just stupid.
Well, you know, I learned a long time ago that you cannot take someone else's struggles personally.
Yeah.
And if someone is struggling enough in their life that they need to send something hateful or they need to lash out, that's not on you. That's on them. You know, and if it wasn't you, they would have had road rage. And if it wasn't road rage, they would have yelled at a clerk. And, you know, you're not responsible for someone else's struggle.
That totally makes sense. The big thing, and I think this was like the most, this might've been the biggest thing that kind of made me angry in your special, not at you, but at the controversial topic, which I never even thought I would ever talk about this with you. But you talk about now that you're a dog guy, right? And I know in the bit you say, you know, it's thanks to an attractive girl who you went out with, and so much so, you know, you're this big of a dog guy that you've actually conceived pups over people. Is that something that you're still doing? I noticed that on Instagram you had kind of touted it a little bit, and I think it's a really cool concept.
Yeah, it's something that, you know, it's something that we're growing slowly.
Mm-hmm.
So for a moment, I thought you were saying that I conceived pups, and I'm like, no, I have not.
No, I didn't see that on Reddit yet, so I'll wait.
So yeah, I created a brand called Pups Over People, which is, you know, it helps raise money for dog rescue, but it basically is a line of fun shirts, posters, blankets, whatever, that have pro-dog sayings, like, it's, you know, and just that poke fun at problems that humans have. Like, a dog would never leave you on red. It's a really rude thing to do to somebody, but a dog would never do that. A dog would absolutely respond. And so the concept behind the brand is that, you know, dogs are better than we are in many, many ways.
Hey, I'm fully with you. I have 2 rescue dogs myself. I know Chuck has a rescue dog. We're very big on that. And I know I just realized my lead in was super shitty there, to the point where it made it sound like I was mad that you conceived this. But I guess the controversial topic I'm talking about is actually, you talked about your dog Walter, who I believe passed away, which I was really sad to hear. Is that right?
Yeah.
And
he passed last year.
Was he 19? Is that how old he was?
No, he was 15.
15.
He was
Okay.
a Staffy.
Yeah,
he was a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, which, you know, if people are unfamiliar, it's like the British version of a pit bull.
Right, and that kind of leads into where I'm going. And I didn't know that this was a thing, but you talked about how Walter would sometimes come with you to shows, but you had to be really careful on where he could travel because of these kind of bullshit regulations against pit bulls. Is that right?
Yeah, Denver actually just overturned theirs this year. And Denver had, you know, Denver, which is a pretty progressive place, had it in place for a very long time. And there was actually a real thing that happened where a service dog, there was a pit that was trained as a service dog for a disabled veteran.
My God.
And they went and took him away from his owner because they said he would have been dangerous. There was also it took me a long time to be willing to perform in Belfast, because Belfast has one of the worst ones in the world, where there was actually a story where there was a pit bull that was owned by a family there, and it passed every temperament test. And not only did the government confiscate it, who's like a television famous dog advocate and trainer, she volunteered to rehome the dog in the United States, and the government said no, and they still killed it. Oh. And the idea that, and when you hear that, you go, okay, that's not them being worried for their citizen safety. That's them actively wanting to kill these animals.
Yep.
And it's disgusting. And I actually smuggled Walter into Ontario, because Ontario has a pretty strict ban. And even though Walter, like, most people wouldn't think he was a pit, I flew with him all the time, even though most airlines have banned pits. I flew with him all the time because I just lied and said he was a boxer mix. But I smuggled him into Ontario, and when we were performing in Ottawa, we stayed in a hotel over the border into Quebec. We stayed in Gatineau because I didn't want to risk, because in Ontario, they have, it's not common, but they have confiscated and killed dogs. And that's so disgusting to me.
That's
what
insane.
They look like. Everything they've done.
Yeah. And I noticed too, I mean, this is something in your, at least in your special, that you can tell. I know that you talk about, topics that obviously you care about, but this to me was the one that resonated, where I thought, okay, Steve really gives a shit about this. Like, and that's kind of hard to tell in comedians sometimes. I like when comedians do that, where I can be like, okay, what he's saying is he's telling a joke, but like, this is serious shit. So I have to commend you on that, because obviously I have two rescue dogs. They're luckily, two corgis, and no one's trying to put them down. But the fact is, dogs shouldn't have to go through this, and owners shouldn't have to go through this. So I'm really glad that your special brings that up, because I knew about these regulations, but I didn't know that that was the stuff that was happening.
Well, I appreciate that. There's actually a line. There was more to the joke that ended up not in the specials because there was only so much time. But there's another part where I talk about everything that happened with Michael Vick. And there's a line where I say the most amazing thing about that story is, I say, here's how great pit bulls are. Every animal in that story was rehabilitated except for one. There was only one that we couldn't rehabilitate, and he played quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles.
That's incredible. I know in the special you call out Mike Vick and Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger always for another reason. But I did notice that, and I wish that joke would have made it, because I think that's pretty. I didn't know about all that. So
yeah, there's a little bit more of it that I don't think I told the story in the special. There was a bit I used to do about talking about there. Most of the time we just read the headlines, and there was a kid who, it said like that a pit bull, bit a kid. But the actual story was that the kid was hitting the dog in the face for an hour before it bit him. And my take on that is that, a hero bites terrorist.
Yeah.
Like,
that's...
the fact that dog showed restraint for 59 minutes, as the joke went, I'd have bit the kitten 3.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think that's a good take on it. I mean, who's gonna sit there and let somebody? Would you let another person hit you in the face for 59 minutes? Probably not. So the fact is, and we have a lot of listeners. The reason I wanted to bring this up is a lot of our listeners, although this is like, obviously we talk about Appalachia here and things like that, and we're kind of giving people a break, which I don't know if you know this. There's a book. It's called Hillbilly Elegy. I don't know if you've ever heard about it, but it's this book that's now okay. Well, it's now being made into a movie, and the day that this comes out, it will be our counter programming to that, essentially. So we wanted to give people a break from that, but the big reason I brought this topic up is because a lot of our listeners, care a lot about animals, or a lot of them are animal activists, and so to hear a comedian, especially a successful one, willing to put this not only in their, in just a bit here and there, but in their special is really important. And I think it gives a voice to where people may not have been listening before.
Well, I appreciate that. And, one of the things I always liked about the bit was how many people heard me explain what the laws do and gasped.
Yeah.
I liked that I was reaching people who didn't know about it. And actually, this conversation reminds me, I don't think I've ever released that full bit. I'm going to go back and find it. And, on one of the warm up shows where I did the bit, and I'll go release that, because I think that entire bit should be out there.
It definitely should. 100%. It should be out there, and more people should learn about this, because I randomly do see those laws continue to come up. And I think it would be, like I said, really good. It's a really nice counter to those bullshit laws. So I appreciate that. I really do enjoy that. And I think it's, like I said, obviously there are not always people who go to comedy shows who maybe read up on different things, different laws. But when you could talk about it, Chuck and I both have law degrees. So hearing somebody actually get up and tell jokes, that are meant to be funny and not just Rudy Giuliani, Giuliani babbling on and on about laws he doesn't understand. It's nice to hear. So we definitely appreciate that. I know that I've rambled on for 40 some minutes, but I do appreciate you doing the interview with us. Steve, if our listeners, maybe they've never heard of you, which I would be shocked if they hadn't, but if let's say one in 100 hasn't, where can they learn more about you?
They can learn more about me on any social media they choose at Steve Hofstetter. Whatever your addictive poison is, I'm on it. So come
Awesome.
say hi.
And I know I noticed you haven't been to West Virginia in about 5 years, but I'm hoping after COVID that can be changed, or at least you can come back to Athens. I saw that you went there in 2016, so maybe you stop by there. But like I said, my wife and I are planning to see you in Columbus in 2021. We can't wait, and I can't thank you enough for doing this.
I appreciate that, and I'll close with a little bit of a West Virginia story.
Sure.
So Walter, before he passed, had been to 47 of the 48 lower United States.
Uh-huh.
And West Virginia was the one he hadn't been to. And so when I knew it was the end, I was in South Florida, and I knew that he was sick and that he couldn't really make it anymore. So what I decided to do was give him one last road trip, because he loved the road and he loved coming with me, and we drove to West Virginia. And that is where he lives now. He is in a field in West Virginia, and that is where he will always live.
That's incredible. I did not know that. That's incredible. Well, we are honored to have Walter here. We're obviously a podcast that focuses on Appalachia, but Chuck and I are both from West Virginia originally. So that's awesome. It's, like I said, we're honored to have Walter here, and thank you for finishing on that note. That's an incredible story.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
All right. Take care, guys.
All right, that was our interview with Steve. John, I know that you are a huge fan of Steve. What was kind of your takeaway from this interview?
My favorite comedian growing up was George Carlin. Steve embodies what George did. He's an observationalist who looks at things and is able to kind of break them down and make them funny so that maybe other people can understand them. That's something I really enjoy of his. And to be honest with you, Chuck, you and I both know this. It's not always a guarantee that when you interview somebody who's, kind of like bigger, that they're nice guys or nice women. It's not a guarantee. Steve was by far one of the nicest people that we've interviewed. He really told it like it was. There was there was no part where he was like, oh, I can't answer that or anything like that. So we're very lucky to have him and very honored that Steve came on the show.
Yeah, and I really appreciated the story he shared at the end about his dog in West Virginia. That was really cool. It was a really special story. So and glad that you all stuck around to listen to it. But I teased this out a little bit in the beginning. I screwed up when we first started recording this, and I said that we were not referencing. I'm not recording on GarageBand, so I'm going to redo that. Because I don't have the separate audio track. Okay. I teased this out a little bit in the beginning. I know that I said, and I screwed up the recording initially. I said that we weren't going to have any reference to Hillbilly Elegy in this. We are, but the only reference we're going to have, which is John's beef, has to do with the movie itself, which comes out today. Please don't watch it, but instead watch or listen to this wonderful beef with Big John.
Chuck, I'm going to make this short and sweet. The thing is, this movie is coming out, and we've been very vocal on how it will continue to set back Appalachia. There's no doubt about it. People love Netflix originals, and they love looking at other regions that they can feel sorry for. And that's exactly why this movie was made, is because they know that it is clickbait, it's poverty porn, and it's the ability to make money. That's why Hillbilly Elegy was created as a book in the first place, and that's why it's created as a movie. Here's the thing. For anybody listening right now, you're probably agreeing with me full force, but there's still a part of you that wants to go watch that movie. I get it, because there's a part of me that wants to go watch it too. I'm urging everyone not to watch it. But if you do watch it, I ask that you be open and honest with people about the movie. There's only two things you can do here. One, you can watch the movie and you can remain silent and let JD Vance continue to do this. Or two, you could watch the movie and then tell people how fake it really is. And that has been kind of the premise of Hillbilly Elegy as we've moved on from the book to the movie anyway. But again, I'm urging everyone not to watch it. What I will say is I've always had beef with JD Vance. That's been pretty obvious. I never thought in my life that I would have beef with Ron Howard. But Ron and John are just not going to be friends, Chuck. It's not going to happen.
Well, that's disappointing, because I was looking for that duo rom-com type deal. Yeah, it's disappointing for me to see this because I am a humongous fan of Arrested Development, and Ron Howard's role in that is phenomenal. And I just, everybody's got real stinkers in their career. I think this is going to be a stinker for him. Well, I know it will. But I think the other thing too is that you're going to see this. I mean, we saw pictures of people who are getting ads for it online. You're going to probably see it in the role when you open Netflix. I know that they've got a lot of money in this promoting it, because there was some initial Oscar buzz. And so it's going to be up there. But the thing that I think is important too is hopefully you've been listening to stuff that we've put out, or that you've been reading things like Meredith McCarroll's, the book that Meredith McCarroll, our guest last week, co-edited, Appalachian Reckoning, or any other books. And you all are now armed with the knowledge to be able to talk to people about Hillbilly Elegy and why it doesn't represent Appalachia. And so when you hear from your friends who are like, oh yeah, I watched this movie, or I was thinking about watching this movie, here's about Appalachia stuff like that, you can now go to them and say like, hey, maybe not. Maybe don't do that. Or here's really what this movie is about. Here's really what the author is about. And so that's all we can really hope for. But as like you said, John, we're moving on from this, and I think it's important that that people know that, but also know that we understand. We understand it's going to be tempting. You're going to open Netflix, going to tempt you there, but just don't give in.
Here's the big thing too. I know that JD Vance is generally who we look at and we say, screw that guy. But let's not give Ron Howard a pass here, because if you've watched any of his interviews, you've seen that he is trying to justify this movie to the umpteenth degree. I mean, he talks about how, he was born in California, but he can really relate to JD's story. That doesn't make any fucking sense. And it's not true. So the big thing here is...
Well, maybe it does relate to JD's story.
Maybe, but he doesn't... To me, he doesn't relate to Appalachia. I mean,
right.
That's my thing, and neither does JD for the other obvious reason. And the big thing here is I urge everyone. Chuck has worked really hard on continuing to add to the graphic that we created a few months ago. And it's going to be, I think... Is it going to max out Instagram, Chuck? 10 images? Do you think it's going to max that out?
Is that a max?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. Yeah. I mean, well, when people are listening to this, it'll be already out, but
but I'm going to urge people to share it.
Right. Well, I'll make it so that it fits. We'll just say that. I'll make it so that it fits on Instagram.
If you think that the last rendition of that was comprehensive, wait until you see what we released yesterday. If you haven't seen it, go check Instagram, go check Twitter, go check Facebook. The Facebook kind of sucks, so screw it.
Facebook does suck.
Really, Go check Twitter and go check Instagram. Share that shit to your story. Retweet it onto your feed, because people need to see that. I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of people not from the region who are watching this movie who are going to continue to have these preconceived notions because of people like J.D. Vance, who claim to be Appalachian but really don't actually understand what that means, and need to see that there are alternatives that show who real Appalachians are. That's what we need. Go share it. Go retweet it. We need it out there because we want to counter program this. That's the whole point. It's why WCW was on Monday nights against WWF. Counter programming is key. Go share it.
What a reference, a powerful reference to end that beef and cap off the show. Absolutely, really proud of that. And really grateful for all the wonderful user input or follower input, user input, everybody that's contributed to that list. It was by no means us that really, we just collected the names and put it into a spreadsheet basically, but really appreciate everybody participating in that. And with that, we'll close out. Thank you again. If you're not watching this and you're listening to it, check us out on YouTube. We've got some videos up there. We record this show by video every week, so you can see us. If you want to see our glistening, wonderful faces, go check it out. Otherwise, we'll see you back here next week.